Hi, I'm Martin Jarvis, and once again, I want to welcome you to another perspective. So, this has been a real interesting ride over the past week or so with the Black Scots TikTok trend. And I'm excited about it. As well, I've responded to some negativities and some issues. But now I think we'll take another turn. There are a lot of assumptions that are being made about people from other lands, whether they're from Scotland or Ireland or Africa, certain countries within Africa, or the United States and England, and all this stuff. And I see it when people are exasperated with particular groups like Americans. This is the problem with Americans, or this is the problem with the English, or this is the problem with the South Africans. This is what we can't do, because you cannot generalize an entire population of the very few interactions that you've had or that I've had. Okay, so I think we can really get caught up in considering an entire nation of a particular culture within that nation has one prevailing mindset, but it's just not true, And we're all different, and you know that in your country, whatever your country is, whoever's watching this video. So I figured, I might start just talking about America, so we can alleviate, misconceptions, because there are a lot of misconceptions about America, and don't get me wrong, some of the misconceptions are assuming things are good when they're not really good, and as well, I believe, assuming things are bad when they're not really bad. So we're going to clear these things up, no holds barred. We're just going to talk about America and the state of Black Americans in America. Now, I think all of us have sort of a brief or a very limited understanding of what went with the goings on in America during the slave trade and slavery in this nation. It was treacherous and it was heinous, and we know that. But what you're going to find is the Black Americans that we have today are the descendants of those who suffered through very heinous times. And so what happens when you suffer and you survive? Well, one of two or three things. One, either you break and you're broken, or you get stronger. And what I'm going to suggest today is that in America today, we as Black Americans, having been through the slave trade and the civil rights movement and then the suffering even between then and now, that we are both broken and strong. Okay? And this is the difficulty that lies here. And some of us have found a way to break out of the negativity, break out of the cycle that has plagued us, but only because of our parents. When you're raised in a family that has a unique perspective or a survival perspective, and you attach a hold of that, and you're encouraged to grow, you're encouraged to become educated, you can find your own unique way out, okay? And so that's the case with my family, okay, and many families. My wife's family as well. My wife was raised by a single Black mother who raised two girls and a boy. And they all became successful. The boy had a trade, and the two girls went to college. One of them, my wife, graduated from college, and very successful. And that's the key to a positive outcome, really, is the family that individuals are raised in. And so I want to reflect then on the majority of Black people in America are not wealthy. The majority of Black people in America are pretty much middle class, okay? But the thing is, most white people are the same thing. but we're talking about Black people today. And what we find in the Black community, especially in the poor Black communities, the Black communities that are being supported primarily by the government, is that there's a lot of drug use, a lot of alcohol use, a lot of babies born out of wedlock. I mean, this is the thing that's going on in America today at a very high rate. This is the destruction that we're facing. Okay, and what I'm suggesting today is this is a result of the history that we've had in this nation. Okay, when you come to a place of hopelessness, When you're talking about hundreds of years of mistreatment simply because you're black. When you have a mindset of hopelessness, you're going to attempt to find joy and happiness any way that you can. And it might be the buzz, it might be getting high, it might be the alcohol, it might be the multiple partners, having multiple partners at all. Whatever it takes to live for the moment, to have fun for the moment. And that moment never ends. And you wake up and you're faced with another set of moments, and that is the lifestyle. And so when you have a lifestyle like that, you're really not going to progress. And that's the situation in the United States today with black Americans, is they're sort of like in a holding pattern, a stagnant pattern where there's no really any much improvement, okay? And I think what's happened is, as a result of the slave trade and the government assistance once the slaves were freed, is that folks got used to that. And after generations and generations of government assistance, an individual comes to the point in life where they believe that I can't make it without government assistance. Government assistance is necessary for my survival. And when you have that mindset, you're stuck. Because the government's going to aid you, but the government's not going to give you enough aid so that you can progress or you can attain higher heights. They're going to keep you right in that place where you're at, and maybe just a little bit lower forever, okay? And so that's what we have in too many communities today. There's a lack of hope, a lack of a feeling that we can be better. So we just make the best, make do with where we're at. Now we can put on a good picture, because we can dress up, we can get fixed up, and we can make TikTok videos and pretend. But we're not Beyonce, we're not Rihanna, we're not Jay-Z, we're not these guys out there with multi-million dollars. We're not those guys, but we can sure look like them, and that's what we spend a lot of time doing. And it's just not been getting us anywhere. Because we feel that if you feel that you can't make it without a handout, like a government handout, then you're never going to progress to great heights, okay? And you have to wean yourself off of that. We have to wean ourselves off of that, and for the most part, we're not. When you look at Barack Obama became president. He was president of the United States for 8 years, 2 terms. And many black people were very discouraged about Barack Obama because they felt that he didn't do anything for them, okay? Now, why does a grown human being, a grown man or a grown woman, believe that in order for them to be successful, somebody has to do something for them? That's the problem, okay? For me, when Obama became president, I was inspired. Now mind you, I had a good job. I've been working since I was 17 when I joined the military, and I'll be 67 this year. That's 50 years of work. I've been unemployed a total of maybe 5 months in 50 years. So I've always been okay, because if you're working, you're going to be okay. That's why I can't see myself being unemployed, because I need money. I like money, okay? So I had been through the military. I worked for the railroad for a year after I got out of the military. Then I worked for NCR Corporation, a computer company, corporate America, 3-piece suit, trench coat, that whole thing back in the day. And after 13 years of that, I took a buyout. And then I went to work for the government as a civilian, and that's where I've been for the past 31 years, okay? So you can prosper in America, and you can be well if you work. And then I'm married, and my wife works. We've been married 27 years, and so she makes good money, I make good money, and we have a good life. But what I'm going to suggest is that there was a particular point in time, maybe 20 or 15 or so years ago, that I decided I needed to increase the money that I was making. And so what I did was I went and bought a book on how to buy bank-owned properties that had been seized from the homeowners by the bank because they failed to make payment. And so I decided I was going to buy some real estate outside of the home that I was living in. And that's what I did. I bought this piece of real estate for like $29,000. I bought it for $26,000. I put $3,000 into it, had some people work on it, fix it up. And I've been renting that property out for the past almost 10 years now for $1,100 a month. I have made approximately about $95,000 off of that $29,000 investment. And that's every month getting paid. And now the house that I bought for $29,000, it's worth $185,000 today. I'll never sell that. And that's just generating me about $15,000 in revenue every year. Okay. There are ways to make money. There are ways to make money in America, but there are ways to stay broke and to stay poor in America. And so that's what I'm sharing with you. Anybody can come and make money, but you have to be focused. You have to be sober-minded. Now, I'm a guy that, back in the day, I was partying all the time. I was getting that buzz, drinking a lot of alcohol in the clubs every single night of the week. That was not conducive to a productive life in America today. You can survive, but you're going to survive at a bare minimum, okay? So I had to stop all that. And I have this 5-point plan. If you want to be successful in America, you have to don't commit any kind of crimes, because we have a racist justice system, racist legal system, racist prison system. So if you don't commit any crimes, you'll keep yourself out of their reach. Secondly, don't do drugs. Stay sober-minded. Third, don't drink alcohol, okay? Next, be healthy. Exercise, eat healthy, don't eat junk foods. I see a lot of folks in Scotland are eating that Popeye's chicken. Junk food, okay? You need to cut that out. Vegetables and fruits and all that good stuff. You know what I'm talking about. Let's see. So stay healthy. Get educated. That is the key to success in America today, is education. And we'll get back on that. But the last thing is to be armed. To be armed. I don't know how it is in other nations around, but America, has pretty free, gun laws. You can buy a gun. And I'm not really a violent person necessarily. And my wife doesn't like guns, and my children didn't like guns, but that AR-15, that assault rifle, I have one of those. I have a shotgun. I have a 9mm handgun. I've never used them, but I have them, and I have a whole bunch of bullets, okay, just in case. Because you might be a good person, but this other person out here that you're dealing with, historically has been kind of crazy. If they crazy up on you, you need to be able to protect yourself, okay? And so I'm ready just in case. Now, getting back to that education, let me tell you why education is important. Education is important because that will allow you to get a satisfactory job if you have an education, if you have a degree, associate degree, bachelor's degree, whatever, okay? And then once you get that job, you don't stop there. You are an entrepreneur. Now you got to figure out other forms to generate revenue, to generate income. That's what I did with that rental property as well. You could also invest. Invest your money, the money you make, into the stock market. And most companies will match the money that you put in, and it's before taxes. And so that's a good deal. Now let me tell you about my education. Because again, I had worked since I was 17, fresh out of high school. I didn't have a college degree, I didn't need one. But I always worked. I always maintained a good stream of income, okay? So, I didn't have an education. My family members, they're college graduates, real smart, real educated. I didn't really need one. But when Obama became president, I saw a man who was younger than me. I was 50 years old when it was announced that he was president. Younger than me, had a Harvard education. He was a Harvard law professor. He was a Harvard-trained attorney. He was a senator from Chicago, Illinois, and now he was president of the United States of America, and all I had was a high school diploma. So I decided that day, on my 50th birthday, November 11th, when it was announced that he was president, I decided I was going to go to school. And I was going to go to night school while I was working and get an associate degree. And that's what I did. I started in January. He was elected in November. I started in January. And so I worked, and I earned my associate degree, but I didn't stop. I kept going. I earned my bachelor's degree. I didn't stop. I kept going. I earned an MBA, a master's in business. And that took me 10 years. When I was 60 years old, I had completed all that. my little sister was like, you want to get a PhD? I'm like, no. I couldn't see any value in that, okay? But let me tell you, since I've, I didn't really get a better job because I was 60 years old and I was fine, making good money, living in a nice home, daughter in private school, everything was cool. But you know what had happened? As I was getting more educated, my worldview was expanding. My opinions and my attitudes about things were beginning to adjust based on the new knowledge that I was receiving. I was changing. And what happens is that you begin to see opportunities that you didn't see before. They were there. But as your worldview expands, it's like your vision gets stronger and you begin to see opportunities that have been there all along. Now let's see. Today I think I've written about 25 books. And one book is called To Be Black in America and Not Die. Because it is very unique being a black man in America, and you have to be aware of the situation and circumstances if you don't want to die, okay? And your history. And I've created a business. I created a motivational business. I've just done a lot of things simply because I got that education, my worldview expanded, and I was able to generate revenue. As well, my wife, we own a daycare or a preschool, okay? And next year we're going to be starting a kindergarten, okay? Money, different forms of revenue. So how did we come up with that? The education. How did education create that? My wife doesn't have a degree in education. Actually, my wife's degree is in purchasing, which is pretty appropriate, believe me. But anyway, she is an entrepreneur. She is a businesswoman. So what I want to share with you today is the importance of an education. I don't know how it is in your country, but educations are available in one form or another if you want to do it. But one thing that's preventing us is we have a high school dropout rate. Why do we have a high school dropout rate? Because of drugs, because of alcohol, because of promiscuity, and have babies being born at young ages. We need to clean up our act. And what that education does, for those of us who have an education, and many do, my daughter is a junior in college, and she's on her way to becoming an attorney. My son is a college graduate as well, and he's making the right moves and everything. But what I'm sharing with you is degrees work. Now degrees work, of course, if you're an attorney, or if you're a chemist, or an engineer, or or a doctor, or a physicist, or something like that, of course. But any degree will do for what I'm getting ready to share with you. Any degree will do, because what a degree gives you are problem-solving skills. That's what you need for everything in life. I mean, come on, problem-solving skills. If you can go to school for 4 or 5 years and graduate, and you were able to take all the quizzes, take all the tests, do all the homework, turn in the projects and assignments, and pass each course, and pass each year, and come to the end of it and graduate with a degree, in that 4 or 5 years, you've learned to problem solve. And problem solving is the key to every success in life. The problem is, for a lot of people in America, they get these college degrees, they graduate, and then they go out looking for jobs in the area of their degree. And that's not always that easy, and often those jobs are not paying well initially. So really what you do is, and this is what I've done, after you've earned your degree, you have a particular skill that most folks don't have, and that's problem solving. So really, this might seem kind of silly, but it's true. Is you just sit down after you've graduated and consider this: I need to make more money. How do I do it? And you'll figure it out, because you've learned to problem solve, and you'll make it work. And that's how you become successful. Look, I have a friend that I work with the government. He's from Haiti. Real good guy, good friend of mine. And so he's got a bachelor's degree. His wife has a degree. She's a doctor. They're both from Haiti. And not only does he work with me for the federal government, he also has a side trucking company, and he also has a side lawn care business, which he cuts my grass, as a matter of fact, or his employees do. What I'm saying is the opportunities in America are endless. They're everywhere. But you have to be able to problem solve. Because if everyone could problem solve, everyone would be wealthy. Everyone would have it made. Everyone would have it going on, but they don't. Most people don't. Most people are satisfied, or maybe they're not satisfied, but they're just regulated themselves to simply living a mediocre life for the rest of their lives, okay? And I'm telling you, in America, it doesn't have to be that way. I don't know how it is in your nation, and I'm expecting to hear from some of you guys on how it is in your nation. Because here, you can be wealthy, but you got to stop doing the drugs. You got to stop doing the alcohol. Don't commit any crimes. Get yourself in shape. Get yourself healthy. Get yourself educated, and get yourself armed. You will prosper. Man, I was telling my daughter when she was in like the 11th grade, that I kept you out of the reach of racism, and she looked at me like I was crazy. Because white people, and all this stuff, yeah, but have they affected you? No. Why? Because we have created an environment for her that neither my wife or I was even raised in. We are in a very good environment, very good neighborhood, immaculate home, 5 cars. I mean, we had her in the best school in the region from the 3rd grade to the 12th grade. And now that school, it was primarily white folks and had a few Indians in there and very, very few black kids. But I wasn't thinking about that. All I was thinking was it was a great education, and this was perfect for her. When you have kids, and especially when they're little, that's all you're thinking about. You just want them to get that education and get them to do well. But when my daughter was in about the 10th grade now, she accused me of keeping her away from her culture. Man, sometimes as a parent, I mean, you do the best you can. You think you're doing the best you can, and then your child comes back and doesn't really appreciate it. But that's okay because I know that she got that education. And so my daughter started a black affinity group in that school, a black group that included parents, the children, and the few black teachers that were in that school. And it grew. And because of that group, they forced the administration to hire more black teachers, and they have more black students coming. And I asked my daughter, I said, why did you really create that group? And she said to me, because I don't want the little kids that come to this school like I did in the 3rd grade and have such a hard time and nobody to share it with. Man, I didn't know she was suffering like that. She's a tough little girl, and now she wants to be an attorney. She wants to be a human rights attorney. I mean, that's the kind of heart she has. She wants to help people all over the world, and she's on her way to doing that right now. She's just an amazing young lady. But the education is the key. If you don't have an education in America and you're not a rap singer or Beyonce or a sports figure, you're not going to be wealthy. Okay? You have to have a plan. And what I'm suggesting is the first plan is that education. And of course, get all those destructive tendencies out of your way. That's how to survive in America. And that's what most black folks and white folks in America do not do. They do not go for that education. And it's very, very important if you want to progress. That's why in America you're going to find most kids end up being on the same economic level as their parents. Because they just fall into that cycle, and they just look at their life, the life that they've lived, and they just repeat the process over and over again, generation and generation again. We're not doing that. My wife and I made a determination that we're going to lift the financial raising of my daughter to a high level, and then we expect her for her situation, for her level in life as she becomes an adult and she has a family to be higher than ours. And the key is that for her kids are going to be higher than theirs. And you could, there is no limit to what you can do. But you can't commit crimes. You got to stop doing drugs, no alcohol, get healthy, get educated, and get armed. For real. Now, as we close here, I want to give you a caveat. Coming to America, you just can't go anywhere blindly. You'll get yourself killed, for real. There are neighborhoods in America that I will not go into. They're not necessarily in my city. I'm good in my city because people know me here. But if I go to the next city, Cincinnati, Ohio, there are neighborhoods I'm not going to be in. I'll get jacked. And especially, there are many places that are very terrible and very dangerous within America, and black communities. And you really don't want to go in there if you don't know what's going on. If you don't have friends or family there, you don't need to be there. So if any of you are planning on coming to America, make sure you know where you're going. Just ask somebody, where shouldn't I go? It's as simple as that. But I give you encouragement. I'm thinking, I've lived overseas. I've lived in Europe. I lived in Europe for 5 years as a young person. I was in the military at 17. I lived in Japan, and my brother was in Korea. I'd visit him and all. And even when I got out of the military, I went back to the Far East, bartended for a while, just chilled out before coming back to the States, And so sometimes you'll find that people, in your country or my country or other countries will find the pickings are thin. That means they can't find a husband, can't find a wife, can't seem to get their lives together. Well, maybe that's over here or over there. Who knows? But it's always best to do your homework first. So I've had a lot of practice with my daughter. She's 20 years old, and from the time she was like in the first grade, I've been talking to her about boys, about age appropriate. As she got older guys and teenagers. I've always talked to her. I've always given her insight because I'm that kind of dad, can share my insight with my daughter. Because I'm a guy, right? So the warnings are there. I don't know how it is in your nation. I don't know how the guys are. I saw a woman on TikTok. She was complaining about the guys in Scotland, the experiences she's had about wanting to make sure she knew how to cook and clean the house. Her response was, do you cook? Do you clean the house? And that was funny. That's kind of how I want my daughter to be, But anyway, America is a very interesting place. It's very interesting because we have come up through it, and we have come up the hard way, but we're on the other side now. And if you want to make money, if you want to be wealthy, if you want to be rich, you can do it here. But you got to come up with a game plan. And part of that game plan, unless you're especially gifted in singing or basketball, is an education. And while you're getting that education, as your worldview is expanding, you'll be getting ideas. And as you begin to get ideas, then you create steps to make that idea come to fruition. And then you just walk it out. Be consistent. You'll get there. So anyway, I'll share a little bit, just rambling on about America today. But there's good and there's bad. But the reality is you are the one that determines what the outcome is going to be. Okay? Be positive. Be sober-minded. And handle your business. But anyway, that's all. But I think I'll put about 3 or 4 more videos out there, on America, just to share, my insight. I have been around a while. I've been in pretty much every aspect of this nation. Now, trust me, when I give you those 5 points, or those things that we need to do, I'm talking from experience because I wasn't any of those 5 things. I was getting high. I was drinking alcohol. I wasn't in shape. I wasn't educated, and I wasn't armed, okay? I was all those things. I was living a destructive lifestyle. I was on a stagnant plane. I wasn't going anywhere. And as I've shared before, I had this epiphany one morning that I just didn't want to be that person anymore. And I just changed overnight. Now the manifestation of the change didn't happen overnight, but I changed overnight. I was no longer Marty. I was Martin. How's that? Well, anyway, I want to thank you once again for joining me for another perspective. And I want to invite you to join me again. You take care. Bye.